All right. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Great to see everybody. Love getting back to everybody. These calls don't come soon enough for me all the time. It's great to see everybody, but we don't get too many chances to see each other enough as far as I'm concerned. And this topic of culture is something we'll be talking about in terms of your business today. But, Chirag was right that we're building a culture right here within this group of people. Culture is something that develops naturally whenever human beings get together. Every family has a culture. Every business has a culture. Every association of people develops a culture over time. But as a business owner, you have the opportunity to do more than just let a business culture develop. You have the opportunity to create and direct a culture. The culture is one of the most important aspects of your business because the culture influences everyone's choices and actions. Why is it that people handle a client in a certain way? Well, it's because that's how they've been trained to within that particular business. Why do certain people show up on time, ready to go for meetings in one team, but maybe not in another? Because those are aspects of the culture. Everything we talked about when we were together in Westport in the COI, all those things are tied to culture. We talked about people being high context communicators versus low context communicators. We talked about people being fixed or fluid time type people. These are all habits and practices that we have that are a reflection of our own internal iceberg, which is what we might consider the culture of one person. But when people get together as human beings, they're challenged to meld those icebergs together in a way that creates value. And so we're going to be looking at this topic of culture over the next month to make sure that you're thinking about what kind of culture makes sense for you and your business, but most importantly, your clients, and how you can develop some key aspects of that culture. So we have a slide deck. I'm going to pull it up here and look through this a little bit, and we'll take some calls, or we'll take some questions afterwards, but happy to take a call or a question or two along the way. So I'll take the lead on this. Chirag may add a few comments here and there, but certainly if a question comes up for you, I'm happy to address it. Let's see how this goes. Let me pull this up. Oh, there it is. All right. Building culture. As a team leader, you have a pivotal role in creating and sustaining a dynamic culture. It's your responsibility to not only identify and personify your core values and clearly articulate those values to your team. We're going to talk about the concept of values today because values are at the core of what makes a culture a culture. Most of us think about the word brand, and everybody says, I want to have a good brand for my business. I want to have a good brand for myself or for the people around me. But if you think about it, where does a brand come from? A brand is your representation in the marketplace about how you do business. You might be technologically savvy. You might be highly informed. You might be a white glove, high touch kind of person. And you want the community to understand what that means if they're going to work with you. But where does your brand come from? It comes from a certain approach to business. In a sense, I'll say, your brand comes from your culture. So whatever the values are that you want people to experience, whatever the elements are of the experience that they get from you, they're coming first from within the culture of you and your team, and then expanding outwards from there into the world. And so it's up to you to define what that is creating and make sure that it's sustained throughout the organization so that everyone else is acting from the same set of principles or ideas that you are. That's what creates a predictable brand out in the marketplace. But it's your responsibility. And what you need to remember is it's up to you. It's not a fly by the seat of your pants, happens by chance kind of a thing. You need to be clear about what those key elements are that are going to inform all the choices and all the actions that everybody makes in your team so that you create a predictable experience for everyone working there, and most especially for the clients who are on the receiving end of it. Okay, next. Successful leaders eat, sleep, and breathe their culture every day. They go out of their way to communicate their culture to their team members. How many of you have a regular discussion with your team members about what your team is all about and how it does business? And I'm not talking about just the regular processes and procedures. I'm talking about your philosophical approach to business. That would be something like, here are the beliefs that we have as an organization, or here are the values that we have as an organization. For example, at the core of Compass's culture are the CEPs: learn from reality, obsess about opportunity, collaborate without ego. These are core beliefs that are core to the culture at Compass. And Robert would like everyone to incorporate those principles into how they do business every day. They're at the center of culture for Compass. By the same token, I can ask you, what is at the core of your approach to business? Do you have a set of beliefs like that? Do you have a set of values? It's up to you to understand what they are, and then to be able to always, in a sense, I always use the word infect. It's up to you to infect people with that particular approach to business. Where does culture come from? It comes from everyone's choices around the values that are kind of lived in the organization, the decisions that people make, and the actions that they take. These things are all related to each other, and they equal culture. Culture, from a scientific point of view, the cultural anthropologist would say culture is a pattern of ideas and actions. More colloquially, it's always just how we do things around here. But how we do things around here should never be left up to chance. So what are values? We're going to talk about values a little bit today because they're one of the core elements of any culture. What values are about how you want to behave or act on an ongoing basis, not about what you want to get or achieve. Those are goals. Values are the fundamental building blocks. Identifying and aligning your team on core values will establish the culture you're trying to achieve. What I always say about culture, what I always say about values is, values are the things that are core to who you are and how you do business. But more importantly, they're at the core of the experience that the other person receives on the outside. When you think of it internally, it's how do we work together? When you think of it, it's externally, it's what do they experience from you? For example, Chirag was talking in the call today. He was talking about the importance of making sure that you log everything when you're having a conversation with clients. Because when you do that, then you know what's happened previously, you know where they're at, and you can respond to them in the moment, knowing what their interests are or knowing what's going on in their life at that moment. And so having this very customer-focused experience is something that they're going to feel every time they work with you. And that comes from values. So when you think of values, it's how we behave internally, and it's key to the experience that the person has externally. Chirag, is there something you want to add to any of this so far? Okay, we'll keep going. So what we're going to do is we're going to just show you a cultural kind of values exercise that we're going to have you do between now and our next conversation. We'll show you how it works, and then you'll have a chance to do it between now and the next time we get together with our peer groups, where we'll talk about your results and how it affects your business. So we're going to give you a worksheet after today that you can take home and look at your leisure and work through a whole set of different values and ask yourself, how important are these values to me and the way I think we should do business? We're going to ask you actually to score them on this very simple scale. Very important, quite important, not so important. And after that, this will help you think through what is it that needs to be communicated to your team. What does it need that needs to be kind of exercised on a regular basis, both inside and when you're serving clients? So this is what the sheet is going to look like. We're going to give you a sheet that's much longer than this. It's going to have a whole bunch of values like this with a simple definition of each one. We're going to ask each of you to go through each of them one by one, think it through, and just put a simple score there. Is this very important to me? Is it quite important to me? Is it not so important to me? Now, I'm going to suggest that when you do this exercise, you don't just do it once. You don't just sit down and take 5 minutes and blast through it and then say, I'm done. I'm going to suggest that you spend the next couple of weeks thinking of all of these, because values are not something that you just give 5 minutes thought to. These are things that are building blocks for the business going forward. And you want to be absolutely clear that the values that you end up choosing for the team are going to endure for the long term, because they are going to affect every single decision that everybody makes, whether they're conscious or unconscious. So we're going to give you a much longer list than this. You'll look through it. I suggest you sit down, take some time, think through it once, come back to it a day or two later, see if the scores that you put down are really the same or not. What you might find is that there are several of the values, maybe 10 or 15 or even 20 of them, that you feel are very important. And honestly, a lot of them are really important. but your work will be to kind of pare the list down from really long to shorter to core. So we'll give you time to do that between now and the next session. And then when we come back and we have our peer group discussion, we're going to talk about what you came up with. Now, let me pause for a minute here and see if anybody has any questions. Who has a question on anything I've talked about so far? I've gone through a lot of stuff kind of quickly here. All right, if there are no questions, then let me ask you, what's coming up for you in your own mind as you hear me talk about this? What's resonating for you? What is it making you think about regarding your own team?
David, I'll
go ahead, Ethan. Sure.
I think my first reaction was like, we probably take a lot of this stuff for granted. And it's like, well, of course we do this, or, of course that's core to how we see ourselves or how we want to operate. And I'm just thinking like, this would be a great exercise to go through, not only just for myself, but for, excuse me, the people on my team. And then obviously is a critical part to hiring and the interview process.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. Remember that what we're saying here is culture comes from values, beliefs, and some other kind of core elements about how you want to do business. It's your philosophy of business. And when we say it's going to run through every area of the business, absolutely, one of the areas is hiring. You would never want to bring on people who don't share a commitment to the values that you believe are important to the success of your business. Remember how I define a team. Very simply, a team is a group of people with a shared set of goals and a shared approach to business success. It's that second part where we start to get into values, beliefs, and culture. Most people think of a team as people with common goals. But if they don't have a shared approach to success, they're never going to win. Can you imagine being a basketball coach where you've got 6 people on your team who think you need to win with offense, and so they never want to play defense? You got 6 other players who think you're going to win with defense, they never want to play offense. You don't have a shared philosophy for success. So absolutely, hiring is one of them. How many of you have ever hired someone where you found out later after working with them that they just didn't care about the same things that you cared about? Yep, a couple. Susan, how did you find out? What became apparent to you about that person that was different from what you wanted or what you expected or what you were looking for?
Over time, sort of, it was a steady discovery over time. It was apparent. I hate to say there were some red flags even in the interview process. But I think sometimes, depending on how someone leads the process as an interviewee, what things are important to them, can sometimes reveal themselves at the end when decisions are being made. And it was just kind of thankfully it wasn't too protracted of a time period, but definitely there's always things that come out in the beginning. So I think the communication and expectations and culture definition up front is 100% important.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes there are red flags that we kind of notice, but we kind of push them to the side, especially if the person has been productive. But remember that if somebody was productive in some other setting, it doesn't mean they'll be equally productive with you, because they're acting within a larger system, and maybe they had more autonomy than you want to give them, or maybe they were working in a different marketplace for some reason, or something's different. You can't just assume that if they did this many sales last year, they'll do exactly the same for me. I'll just sit back and count the money. When you bring somebody into your company, remember that you're bringing them into a system. It's a group of people working together in a certain way. And any good person, the right person, can definitely augment that and improve it. But the wrong person, of course, takes you in the wrong direction. And so it's up to us to be clear about what we're looking for. And unfortunately, what I see, and what I've heard Chirag say the same thing, so many people are so focused on just like the dollars that somebody represents in bringing somebody on. And we don't necessarily think of what the problem is. We don't think about what potential problems are. And yet we find out later that there is a problem. The person has a very different way of doing business. Maybe they're not as ethical as you are. Maybe they don't care about the customer as much as you do. Maybe they don't care about keeping the CRM up to date and things accurate. Sooner or later, it's going to come out. Franklin, I see your hand up. Can you come off mute?
Hey, David, good morning.
Morning.
You know, you reminded me of something. Culture is so big for us. And if you just, there's a million metrics for someone's performance, and there's almost no metrics to measure someone's trust. So if you just focus on the metrics of performance, you're always going to pick the wrong person. So figuring out how you can have that trust and performance scale of only going after high trust individuals, no matter if they're high, mediocre, or low performing individuals, if you do it that way, culturally, things tend to pan out better than they would if you only focused on performance.
Thank you, Franklin. You know, that's a great point there. Remember that a business is a whole system of different elements. It's not just numbers. And unfortunately, numbers are very easy to count and culture is harder to count. And we tend in all businesses to focus on the things that are easy to count. But Einstein, after a lifetime of thinking about things, said, not all things that count can be counted, and not all things that can be counted count. And so he was making a statement that there's certain things in life or in business and that are not always the easiest things for us to focus on. Chirag, something to add?
Yeah, this is the number one challenge. I would say it's like almost like a problem or epidemic that the teams have as a whole. You have all people that are one certain way and are moving in a certain direction. And, you know, one of my business coaches, she calls them seductive distractions. You find a person and they have something, it's like a seductive distraction. And our minds go, oh, I can make money off this person, everything else. And all it takes is really one disruptor to change an entire group. And we've seen with teams that we've worked with, literally one bad person make all the good people like stage a coup. And so when you're doing this, you have to realize the culture and the people you surround yourself with, and it's the same thing with clients, are more important than money. And if you have a certain vibe and everything else, you know, I've heard people say things like, maybe it was Franklin said this, if I can't drop the F-bomb in front of them and I feel uncomfortable, they're probably not a good fit, right? And like, if you start thinking about it, you have to be able to be who you are around the people that you're with. And if there's not a high standard for culture of who these people are to their core, your team will always have some form of irregularity or dysfunction. You have two team leaders or two co-principals. If you don't share the same value, the same culture, the same beliefs, it goes out the window. And if you think about it in human relationships, two people could love each other so much, but if they don't share and align on values, which are culture, the relationship never works. One person sees things one way, another person sees things another way. So our goal in effectively hiring is to find people that share our values and see the world in the way we do. Dream big could mean anything. Robert tells you what it means a compass. Moving fast means one thing. Robert tells you how it means a compass. So if you align on that version of moving faster, great. But if you don't align on it, culture and really articulating your culture in a hiring process is the fastest way to flush people out.
So I often think about cultural development as clarity and then communication. That is, you need to be clear in your own mind, what are the cultural pillars first? And then you need to communicate it. Or another way to say it is, it's about clarification, demonstration, and communication. That is, you need to be clear about what they are. You need to demonstrate what they are. You need to be a walking, talking version of the values that you say are important. Because if people don't see you doing it, they're not going to do it either, right? Your actions are going to speak louder than your words. And then conversation or communication. That means an ongoing conversation until the end of time about what these particular things are and how they relate to the success of the business. Because culture will evolve naturally and it'll devolve naturally. And so even if you clarify something in teams, you know, they'll have a retreat once a year or something, and then they'll get together and they'll have the values and they'll have do some exercise. Everybody feels great. And then they forget about it after that. It kind of falls apart. You need to stick with it. Evan?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did I hear you correctly using the word infect when you were talking about, showing your team your values and infecting them with what you're all about. That for some reason that really resonates with me, and I'm just questioning myself. Do I do a good job of showing or infecting my business partner and the team members what our core values are?
Great.
that
So
really
I've got a
resonates
simple way
with me.
for you to find out, Evan. Just next time you have a meeting, or you can do this one by one, just ask a simple question. What are our team's highest values? Or what are our team's values? And just have them give them to you and see what you get. And if everybody gives you the same 3 values, you're doing a great job of communicating it. If people give you different values, they didn't get the message.
You know what's interesting? David actually shared this with me. I use this all the time in team building. Go sit in a room with your team and ask each person, and Gretchen's here, so we actually did this for her group, and she's like a small army of humans. So like 15, 18 people. Do you know what we found? That only 2 people actually had one of the same goals. Every single one of the people had different goals. So how can we all ever reach a goal if we don't even know what the same goals are? Some people tell you their personal goals, some people tell you their team goals, some people tell you the context of what their job is, and culture is the same thing. So it's a really interesting concept. And people always say this is woo-woo, this is fluff, this is not anything. We're always talking about how we retain agents. This is, I believe, is the #1 driver.
The research shows that teams that are highly effective over time, the most successful teams in any business, not just real estate, are aligned in 3 areas: goals, roles, and rules of engagement. They have a common concept of what the goals are. They have a common understanding of what each person's role is, and they have a common idea of how they want to work together, rules of engagement. And that's where the culture comes in, because the values greatly affect how they have meetings, how many meetings they have, who's involved in the meetings, how often they communicate clients, in what way do they communicate with clients. Virtually everything that happens in a business is influenced by culture. So for Evan and for everybody, if you want to test that, it's very easy. Just say, what are our team's values? And Chirag's right about the other one. We've done that with many, many teams. And it's a simple question. You just ask the team, what are our current team's goals in priority order? That's all you have to ask. And I almost guarantee you're not going to get the same thing among even 2 or 3 people on your team. And what that tells you is you're assuming that everybody has the same understanding of what the goals are or what the culture is as you. And the reality is they don't. That's why we're talking about it today. It's important for you to clarify and then communicate. So it's clarification, demonstration, you need to walk the talk, and then conversation, an ongoing dialogue about these things until the end of time. Do you think that Robert came up with collaborate without ego and be opportunity obsessed 10 years ago and he never thinks about it today? Absolutely not. He talks about it. It's still featured prominently here and there. It's something that he's still trying to infect everybody with at all times. Of course, there's lots of new people coming into Compass. So yes, that's important for them to understand and kind of be acculturated into that approach to doing business. But the point is, you need to make sure that everybody understands, what do we hold on to as a team? What unites us as individuals? It's the culture, and at the core of the culture is values and beliefs. Who else has a thought about what we're talking about today? Thomas, I kind of see you looking intently. I don't know if that's just your look today or you're really thinking through this or what.
Yeah, I think, we just have to be more intentional for my group just to, kind of create that culture. And, I think like Ethan said, you kind of take some of this stuff for granted. I think we want to kind of do more of a retreat with the team and be a little bit more intentional about, making an effort every day with that.
So when it comes to values, there's 3 things that you want to clarify with your team. One is the value itself. What's the word you're talking about? Secondly, how do you define that word? Because even if we use the same word, what we find is very often people have completely different ideas of what a word means. What does professionalism mean? Do you think we could take 5 different people into a room and ask them all, what is professionalism? And they would all give us the same definition? Absolutely not. And so you see that coming out in the business when you expect somebody to be on time for a meeting and they're late. You'd say, in your own mind, maybe they're unprofessional. Or if they see there's a problem with the client and they don't bother to deal with it till tomorrow or the next day, you might say that's not professional, right? Their idea of what professionalism means is different, even if you may use the same word. So you need the word, you need the definition, and thirdly, what does it look like within the confines of our day-to-day business? How do we demonstrate that value? This is a key part of the dialogue that you need to have with people. If you have a person who's out in the field versus somebody who's a TC, how can those people express your key values? If they can't translate the concept into the actions, that is the value in action, then it has no value to the rest of the team internally or externally. Does that make sense? If your key value is service and you want your clients to experience service, but your agents don't know how to turn the concept into an actual experience of service, your client is never going to get that experience of your brand. And so you have to do the work of identifying the value, defining the value in a way that people understand what is your kind of perspective on that, because people have different ideas. And finally, what are actions that might reflect that value in the course of day-to-day business? If you can have that kind of a conversation and come back to it from time to time, it's really valuable for your team over time. Imagine you hire a new person, you say, okay, you're our new transaction coordinator, or you're our new COO, and they don't know how to translate these things into action. What happens? Nothing. The culture doesn't exist at that particular moment. It's up to the whim of how that person interprets that particular concept. And we don't want to leave the business up to everyone's individual whim. We want to have a shared approach to business success. And so everyone should be able to identify 2 or 3 actions that they can take that reflect that value in their part of the business. And so if you have a retreat once in a while, great, but there needs to be some time built into your meetings once in a while, once a quarter, once a month, whatever is right for you, that continue to talk these things through to make sure that everyone's still on the same page. So let me go through a few more slides here, and we'll kind of like finish up the assignment that you'll have, and then we'll come back, we'll have a little more conversation about it.
All your mind should be spinning with thoughts right now.
Okay, oops, we're on the wrong page there, hold on. Okay, so when we left, we were talking about this particular list. We're going to give you this worksheet. I'm going to suggest that you work through it little by yourself. This is not something that you should do as a democracy for your team. It should be something that you should first clarify yourself, and then you can bring to the team and talk it over with them. But we'll give you this worksheet. Use it between now and our peer group session to think through which one of these are ones that you might consider very important versus quite important versus not so important for you. Then what do? Once you've ranked each statement, take a moment to look at any statements you marked as very important and highlight the ones that are important to you. So what we're trying to do is boil this list down with all these various values, and there are others. You don't have to limit yourself only to this particular list. If there's a value that's really important to you and has been part of how you do business that doesn't happen to show up on this list, use it anyway, right? We don't want to say no other value matters. This is just like a starting point for you to think about it. So you'll start with this long list, see which ones are very important, and kind of highlight those for yourself. Those are the ones that you want to be thinking about as you move forward. Now, how do you turn them into culture? While you may deeply understand and embody these values because you created them, it's imperative that your level of understanding flows down to the team. Why spend time crafting values if your team doesn't have the same understanding you do? So when it comes to the next part of this, which is after the clarification piece, this is the demonstration and conversation piece. How have you shared it with your team? Did you have a discussion about it? Is it written down somewhere in black and white? Do you come back to it and talk about it from time to time? When do you have these kinds of conversations? How often do you have them? Do you do it as a group? Do you do it one by one? All these things are things that you should think about as an integrated plan to infect everybody with these particular values. In most cases, it requires conversation as a group because this is a shared philosophy for success. Just like the coach of a basketball team is going to say to the team at the beginning of the year, we're going to win with defense, or we're going to outwork every other team. We're going to get every loose ball on the floor, right? You say it to the whole group, but you might have to work with people individually to make sure that they're understanding it as well. So most cases, the teams that are successful about this are having a shared discussion as well as individual one-on-one discussions wherever appropriate. So remember, it's clarification, demonstration, conversation. Articulating values. Select 3 of the values that you listed as most important. So you're going to take this list of a lot, you're going to boil it down to the ones that you feel are very important, and then you're going to think of 3 particularly that you think are really perhaps most important or absolutely essential for your team to embody over time to be successful. And think about how that might look externally as well as internally. For example, and this is about turning it into action, as I said before, articulating the value of accountability externally might mean to your externally to your team for external purposes might mean doing what you said you would do in every interaction with the client. How impeccable are you with your word as far as clients go? If you say, I'm going to get you something by next Tuesday, do you get it to them by next Tuesday? If you say, I'll check on something and get back to you tomorrow morning, do you really check on it and get back tomorrow morning? What is their experience of how that word integrity really shows up in your actions with them? Internally might be something similar, maybe a little different. Might mean keeping your commitments to your business plan, personal development, and to your colleagues and yourself. So you can see how this word accountability and this concept of accountability could flow throughout the whole business. It could involve any aspect of the business that you or other people are involved in. And this is why it's so important to get it right, because it's always there. Culture always exists, whether you like it or not, it develops. And we can all think of families in the world that have a bad family dynamic, that's a family culture. We can think of businesses that have a bad dynamic, that's a business culture. It's always there. So when you start thinking about which of these values is really most important, you need to think about how would that affect my team internally, and how would it affect our external operations with our clients? So, as I said, we'll give you this worksheet and just be prepared to work through it between now and the next call, and then we will talk about it at the peer group session to help everybody share a little bit with each other and benefit from each other's experience with this. Okay, so Sue's just put it in the chat there, so feel free to download a copy.
So here's a few things I want you guys to start thinking about as we start kick off this discussion. You think of a value, there's three parts to a value that I think about, especially in real estate teams. Number one is, what does this mean to you? So I can give a example of, what was this? Give me 1 second. Community. So we had an agent we worked with, and one of her values was community. And I asked her what it meant for her. And she says, what it meant for her is being all in on the people you work with, and that's supporting them both in their professional and personal life. Well, that's a very different thing when you show up to work for some people. And then how does it show up internally and externally? You may live one value one way with people on your team. And as David says, it's about being, right? How are you going to be with people? And then the same thing with clients, right? So these words can have all of these different meanings. And, if you just keep going back to Robert's CEP video in Washington, D.C. and watch how clear he articulated these values that 35,000 people live in now and growing. So when you guys think of your values, how do you articulate this with your team? Like when somebody does something with one of your values, do you celebrate it? Is it an email? Is it part of your team meetings? Or is it just some words that you say because it sounds cool and you want to recruit people? And as a business owner, we all feel better about when we have these things done. We look at our words, the C's of community, collaboration, and caring. So how are we living that way with all of you? And if you look at this group, how many people we declined, it's because of culture. You put one wrong person in a group like this, it can throw the whole entire thing off. And when you think about how important culture is, look at how we put all of you together, for the ones that came, for 2 days, and how you all feel like you're best friends forever now. It's the culture. And that's why I spoke to every single one of you individually. And it was a very curated group of people. So this is a skill you could learn. It's not like some innate ability or sixth sense. Yeah, some people are good at it. Like you can look at Tim and Lindsay Rothman. They're amazing curators of people and good humans and everything like that. And, you know, their retreat parties are like legendary, but they put good people together. So when you start thinking about your team and culture, start approaching it a little different. Like, I know Nicole, right? Can you mute yourself? Hello. Your team is the one in the Boston Library every day in the playbook sessions, correct?
Yeah.
So part of their culture, and I want you to talk about it, how do you get all these people in there and make part of your culture personal development and growth?
When we had connected with Gretchen about her strategy for it, Dan and I had agreed that we really liked it. And we asked for each of the team members to make a commitment as we did for them.
And how's it turned out putting them all together like that?
I think that it holds them more accountable for the attendance aspect of it.
How about the human element of like these people actually physically go through, learn things, share things every day? Has it brought them closer together? Do they feel more like a group, or are they still kind of where they are when they started?
I would probably lean towards the latter of both at this time.
So that's ready. So there's the interesting part. So now here's what you do. Now this is about building culture and community, right? And like you can do it very easily. One of the things that we found with Gretchen's group is people sharing takeaways, people becoming accountability partners, people role playing together. You know, Gary Vee said this years ago. He's like, if I have two awesome, valuable team members, if I could spend $1,000 each and send them to the opera together because they both like it and they can be best friends, they're gonna be 100 times more productive at work. So start thinking about how you can take these group of people and have them engage with each other.
I think Nicole's case is a really interesting example because the people are there, they're physically together, they're engaging and learning, but she's saying perhaps they're not connecting with each other any further than complying with her request or requirement that they be there. And so if that were the case, then I would say to Evan and everyone else, they're not quite infected yet with the culture. They're complying, they're showing up, and that's good. And maybe there are some ways that you can kind of help them see how they can take it a little bit further. You know, your culture needs to be something that expresses who you are as a person. It can't be something like, well, this is who I am as a person, but here are the values that I want to communicate to everybody as, you know, as a business owner. A business can set up any values, that's true, but most businesses that are really successful are some reflection of the people who set up the business and run the business. And if it's a business where a single person has a huge influence on it, like most small businesses do, then that can really take on that cultural aspect that's in that individual person's iceberg. For example, look at Steve Jobs. Every product that Apple ever made had two cultural elements in it. One was easy to use and intuitive. Since the very beginning, that's what Apple was all about, right? Remember, their very first tagline in their commercials was computers for the rest of us. And ever since then, they had to be easy to use and intuitive. Secondly, have to look freaking cool. Every single product that they've ever made has looked and felt really cool. They've never made a simple gray plastic box in any computer. They've always had colors and shapes and feelings. And you know what? Steve Jobs used to actually design the inside of the computer as well because he was so obsessed with aesthetics. He would actually design the shape and the location of all the chips and everything inside. And somebody asked him, why do you do that? And he says, just because I'm obsessed about this. And so that particular value of aesthetic attraction or aesthetic beauty was something that's been part and parcel. Even the stores, think of the stores, right? You go into an Apple store, it's not like any other store, although others have copied it. And so you start your value search by thinking about what do I think is important as a human being? And therefore, you know, what do I think is important to make this business succeed? And any of those items on that list that we're going to give you could be something that really resonates for you personally, but it shouldn't be something that you're distant from, because if you're distant from it, chances are your people are going to be distant from it. You need to be so bought into those particular things that everybody else gets what you're talking about. They see that it's real. They see you demonstrating it. And that's how you infect them. Because any one of those things is important. And, you know, you can call any shots if you want. You're the boss. But it has to be real for you. Let me ask if anybody else besides Nicole is is struggling in some way to have their folks follow a particular philosophy or value for the business? How is that showing up in your business?
Don't all rush at once, please.
Let me ask a slightly different way, same question. Who has somebody in your business is doing something not the way that you would like them to be doing it? 1, 2. Lindsay, can you give us an example of that, please?
Hey, sorry. My new admin, I'm not happy with the way she is corresponding with clients and other agents.
Okay, got it. Can you say in a little more detail, what's one way that she's doing it or not doing it that you feel isn't right?
She's not proofreading. She's not going back and editing what she's saying. She's just kind of firing things off.
Okay, got it. So then there's something like if you were to say, what's the value of in your business that you want her to be more thoughtful about or respectful of, what would it be? Would that be accuracy or care or what?
I think kind of both. The inaccuracy to me shows that she's not caring.
Okay, got it. So then part of what I'm hearing from Lindsay is that care matters in her business. And this person is not demonstrating care by just firing things off, not proofreading, something like that. And so there's an impact on the people who are receiving that, which is not care, right? The impact is care doesn't exist right here, right now. So totally get that. Does everybody see how that's an example of a person not honoring a particular value that the leader may care about?
Here's the interesting part, right? So if you could tell me an email, right? And this is a good LFR for everybody. How would you send the email and how did they send the email? Like to a client or an example of something, Lindsay. She just froze and this is like.
Might be frozen, yep.
Oh, there you are. How would you write the email and then how did they write the email? You have to unmute yourself.
It was really just typos. Just her grammar is not, she's just using the wrong words in the wrong places. She doesn't sound educated in them. She's not taking the time to think things through. And I need someone who's going to proofread my stuff, not me proofread their stuff.
So this is a really good example. I think everyone, look, when we want something in life, we see what we want to see and we hear what we want to hear in the context of what we want. So if writing is something important, we call this situational hiring, right? We want to create the actual situations that people are in that are the most important to us and see how they respond and more importantly, how they think through it. So you give somebody assignment, and this is good for culture, hiring, recruiting, all of these buckets. And I'd say, hey, here's the assignment. Here's what I want you to do. Here's the backstory. Here's an actual situation. You can send me what your answer or what you feel like the next steps were, or however it is. In this case, write an email back to a client and feel free to ask me any questions you like before, during, or after. And now what's going to happen is you're going to see how the people read what you said. They're going to be types of people who just ask you a question right away that's answered in some of the stuff that you already put in like your little brief. You're going to see how they write. You're going to think how they do. And I expect them to make mistakes. We want them to make mistakes in doing this because in the mistakes, you're going to see what question they ask, how they respond to feedback. Are they open to feedback? Are they defensive? Are they ask questions to think through things? Or they just will lean on you where you become their employee? So it's really important when we talk about culture and bringing a person on like this, everyone can get frustrated really quickly, which impacts everyone's culture.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage to being clear about culture before you bring someone on is you can incorporate or infect them into the culture from the very beginning. First of all, you can decide whether they're right or not. Secondly, you can decide how do you acculturate them along the way so that they get how it is that you see these values and how they run through the business. It's a little harder to do when you've been operating a business already, and now you say to your team, all right, now we're going to do a better job of this particular value. But don't let that scare you, because that's what you're going to have to do. As you clarify what your values are, you're going to have to bring this back to your team and have some of the dialogue. And certainly we can, support you to do that right. But don't let that scare you. Don't say, well, I've always kind of let people get away with this, that, or the other thing. And now I'm pretty sure that I don't want to let them do that anymore. It's up to you. It's your business. And so, you get to call the shots here. And it's up to everybody else to listen well and do their best to follow what it is that you think is at the core of business.
Nicole, she's driving, but I think you raised your hand. I don't know if you did it on purpose. Unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I'm driving, but just a quick side note on our agents having a bunch of typos and stuff. We have in our contract to have everyone, they have to install Grammarly on their phones and on their computers, and that's made a huge difference. Just side note.
Thank you. What a perfect example of culture, right? Here's another case where somebody says accuracy is important, or service is important, or professionalism is important. Whatever the value is that this action fits under, they're saying, if you're going to join our team, you need to get this. And it's very simple. It's black and white. She makes the call. Everybody goes with it. It's a great example of what we're talking about here. Remember, the three things you're thinking about is, what is the word? How do we define the word? What's our perspective on that? Because people have different ideas and we need to have a common understanding. And third, what are the actions or behaviors that define the expression of that value on a regular daily basis? And one action is downloading Grammarly or whatever other app or something like that that allows you to do what it is you're trying to do.
I see everyone's like the Apple wheel, like spinning.
Yeah.
The sad thing is she has Grammarly.
Oh,
I already made her.
Listen, I can say this candidly, and Suze is on here, so she knows. They do not want me sending anything at this company at a large level of people before somebody proofreads it.
Facts.
Facts. Yeah, exactly. But I write how I talk, and then somebody has to fix it. But people know that. So the question is, Lindsay, how can you get her to a place of showing her what great looks like? And look, a lot of times in these conversations, it's like, as soon as you say you, the whole thing's done. The people are just going to get defensive. So using these words, help me understand, creates a more positive dynamic for a conversation. Help me understand how I can best support you in doing this, and what's been your experience of grammar in the past. And see what she says.
We're talking about performance management here at this particular moment. How do you manage the performance of somebody who's not measuring up to expectations? Well, performance management is always tied to expectations, and expectations are always influenced by culture or values, right? Whatever expectation that you have for how someone sends something out, or how they deal with a client, or how staff within the company deal with each other, it's always a reflection of what you value. So I hope everybody walks away from today's call recognizing that culture is something that exists in your business at every minute. And if you don't have control of it, manage it, shape it, evolve it, develop it, you're missing the opportunity to develop the kind of business that you want to have. You're leaving it up to everybody else to kind of like throw their own spin on what business is. And while we like diversity of ideas and diversity of perspective and diversity of approaches and problem solving and all that, still you need something that ties everybody together. So start with values, identifying 3 or 4 core values, defining what you mean by those things, and then having a dialogue with everybody about what that looks like in the day-to-day course of business gets you like 70% of the way there for how you want to have an experience with each other on the team, and most importantly, how you want your clients to experience your brand. Let me just ask, who has any kind of a hesitation, like a but kind of a thing coming up in their mind? I'm just curious. So everybody then feels pretty comfortable to have some exploration here between now and our next conversation. And depending on, how you kind of shake out on that value stuff, that you'll be able to confidently have some discussion with your team members somewhere down the line.
We all have to do something here. Look, remember, part of this program was building and scaling a foundation. And in the end, the hardest thing to do is choose culture over money. You get somebody that's a great producer, but they're just terrible for your team dynamic. You got to get rid of them. One of my favorite equations in team building is addition by subtraction. Most people I've worked with here I've told you have to fire somebody. And if you've not had the pleasure of sitting in a room with me, odds are I will find someone and tell you to fire somebody.
And again, your hesitation to fire somebody is just a reflection of your own personal culture, right? Like you may think, oh, maybe she'll get better, or maybe he'll get better, or I can tolerate this. But one of my questions I always ask clients is, as a leader, what are you tolerating in your business? And if you're tolerating somebody that's not a good fit, that's causing extra work for others or causing confusion or something like that, why are you tolerating it? You know, you get to make a call on that every day. And if your response is, well, I'll just hope she'll get better. Hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a plan. And so if a person isn't a fit for you culturally, there's absolutely somebody else out there in the world who could give you the same production or better while being a better fit and making a better experience for everybody. But it starts with you being clear about what those core elements are. If you're not clear, no one else will ever be on the same page with you.
So everybody, if that doesn't have any questions, comments, concerns, we could stick 5 minutes back into your calendar. But look, start looking at the values, start thinking about this. This is one of what Dave and I would say favorite peer group discussions, because it's really interesting. And Franklin's view on the trust principle, I think it was Simon Sinek that said that. He shared me a video on it. So, you know, if you Google or YouTube Simon Sinek hiring for trust, the video is great. Look into it. He has the most interesting things about culture.
So everybody block some time in your calendar to give due diligence to that list of values. Don't just blow through it and then come up with 5 or whatever and do it in 5 minutes. Sit down, think about it, go out for a jog or a run or whatever you do, come back to it a day or two later with some fresh eyes, think about it a little bit more. You don't need to spend hours and hours at it, but you should come to it 2 or 3 or 4 times between now and the peer group conversation. And then we'll talk about it at that time.
All right, everybody, happy Tuesday. I hope you all have a great day. For my friends on the West Coast here, does anyone want to hop on a panel next Wednesday and Thursday? Wednesday in San Diego, Thursday in Torino and Newport Beach.
LA, Torrance, Newport Beach, Orange County, and San Diego, Del Mar.
1 Paseo Drive.
Yep.
Maybe Thursday for me, Chirag. We'll talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shoot me a message soon so I can get them to
Okay.
start promoting. They're promoting this to the entire region, so it's a really good opportunity for exposure.
I'll let you know today for sure.
All right, cool.
And by the way, folks, one more thing. Last time on the call, we had a couple of you saying you were going to send in a couple items to the vault to me. I haven't received any of them. So if you were intending to send me something, please send it and I'll make sure it gets into the vault. David at ChiragShahCoaching.com.
Okay, so let me just touch upon this just quickly. Look, we all have accountability to ourselves and our peers. Everyone wants to build the vault. If you can't send stuff on your own, just copy David on an email with your operations director and we will get the stuff from them. We want to maximize the experience, but you guys have to meet us halfway. So everyone take 5-10 minutes and do that. And it doesn't matter. I don't have everything. If you didn't have everything, anything, you'd never be on this call. Like, period, end of story. So even if they're emails or they're templates from stuff, like Ethan, I found what you were sharing that you use in another program really easy, like really interesting. So if you could like screenshot it, PDF it, send it out, people would love to do that. You got to realize Tony Robbins calls it the 1 millimeter rule. When you're at this level of success, it's those small tweaks that make a difference. And then a lot of these things, if somebody sees that, it triggers the thought like, whoa, maybe I should do it like this.
I did, for the record.
What's that?
I said I did send it in, for the record.
Okay. Well, I would, yes, knowing you, I do believe it. I was just using you as an example.
No, I understand. I understand.
You know, like Evan, you and Susan sell high-end luxury properties, right? People would be really interested to know how you market a home like that. Because one of the challenges people have when they get like these gazillion-dollar listing opportunities, what do I say? What do I say to a seller? How's it different? And really, how do I market a home like this? Nicole and Daniel, you guys send everything in, so I'll give you guys kudos. Dennis sent some of his stuff in as well. So look, guys, let's all keep focused forward. For any of you that want to come physically to our office and hang out with people, on June 21st, we'll be hosting a live stream. Rory's definitely coming. We're trying to get Will to come. We're kind of making it like a 3-hour experience for people. They're going to stream this throughout the entire country. So you guys are the ones that we're inviting into the audience. We'll have lunch. There'll be a couple hours that David and I will just be floating around just to talk to you about anything with your business, and we'll have an early happy hour and we'll call it a day. But there'll be some networking, there'll be training, and it's going to be an awesome day. So for people that are close or just kind of want to come meet people, there'll be people from both groups. I encourage you to make the trip. June 21st, 11 to 2 p.m. And look, the invites to the actual seats in our office are very selective. There's only a certain amount of seats, and obviously you're the people that we have the closest relationships with out of all of our community. So we'd love for you to be there. Our very own Ben will be on a panel. And we're ready to rock and roll. All right, everybody. It's 12 o'clock. Let's be punctual. I'll see you all later. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
David.
Easy, everybody.
Guys.
Have a great week.
Weeks.